Hey guys, it's Andrea with VW Family Farm and welcome back to the kitchen. We are here for sourdough part 2. So we talked on our previous sourdough video about starting a sourdough starter and I had a lot of response and a lot of questions about it. So today I'm here to answer some of your questions and proceed with what can you do now with that sourdough starter you've made. So stay tuned. Okay, after our last video, I've taken some notes of some questions y'all left me and I want to try to answer some of your questions, tell you what you can do now, because if you started a sourdough starter when I put that video out, you're probably ready to make something. But first let's go through and let me tell you a few things that you ask about, and that because it's been a while since I've done it, I hadn't thought of specifically saying. So I want to kind of answer some of those questions. You might see me looking down a little bit. That's because I don't want to miss any of your questions you left me. First off, you're trying to catch yeasts and bacteria from the air. You're encouraging those to get in your jar without getting anything like bugs or gnats or anything in there too. So I told you to leave a loose lid on it. Make sure it's loose. You might even put like a coffee filter or a piece of cheesecloth and a rubber band on it. That'd be fine too. If you use a lid, which is what I do, just make sure it's loose. That is very important. Also, someone asked me about cross ferments, and that's a great question. What they're referring to is things like water kefir, kombucha, other things you might have going on in your kitchen. I've not had any problem with that, and I do a lot of fermenting. Like I might have sourdough and pickles going at the same time, and sauerkraut and kombucha and water kefir. I might have all those going. I just don't sit them right next to each other. So I think as long as you keep just a little bit of distance, and my kitchen is not very big, so mine are not very far apart. I don't feel comfortable giving you an exact length to keep them apart. I would just say just don't sit them right next to each other. But I'm limited on space, so mine are fairly close together and I've not had any trouble. The next thing I was asked is, so once we've made one, how do we use it, or how do we sub it in real recipes? Well, there's a few things I want to tell you on this part. If you're wanting to sub it in just a plain recipe that maybe grandma's roll recipe or something like that, that's not really a sourdough recipe, that's going to be a little bit advanced, and you go for it and try it. I really haven't done a whole lot of that. When I bake with sourdough, I'm usually using a sourdough recipe. But I told you before, I do like Wardy over at Traditional Cooking School, and I like the Sally Fallon book, Nourishing Traditions. I like a lot of those books, so I have read about doing that. If you're going to do that, for every package of yeast you would use, you're going to sub in a cup of sourdough starter. But think about that. A package of yeast is just going to be some little granules, but now we're putting in a cup of something liquidy. So we're going to have to take something out of our recipe. And that's what I wrote down, what they suggested. They suggest taking out a half cup of water and 3/4 cup of your flour if you're going to put that cup of sourdough in. Because think about it, you're basically putting in the water and flour in that cup of sourdough. Again, I have not done a whole lot of that, taking a regular recipe and converting it. So do that at your own risk. Have fun with it, play with it. From what I read also, you know if it's a recipe you've tried before, the consistency the dough or batter should wind up being. So if it's way too wet, you need to add a little more flour, or if it's, again, way too dry, add a little water once you sub that sourdough starter in. Also, if you sub it in a regular recipe that does not have a rise time, you're going to need to add a rise time. For every hour that a recipe would have a rise time for, say, grandma's rolls, if she used dry active yeast or quick yeast and it only needed to rise for an hour, you're going to need to let it rise for 5 to 8 hours. So sourdough is a slower acting yeast than dry active yeast or baker's yeast or something like that. Okay, I was also asked what kind of flour can you use and should you use? People use all kinds of flour. People use rye flour, spelt flour, wheat flour. There's gluten-free sourdough starters, all those types of things. I have made mine using wheat flour, meaning white flour or whole wheat flour. I mean wheat flour as in from wheat. I have mixed those up and I've had no trouble. I have not had experience, I told you before, with gluten-free sourdough starters, but I know a lot of people do it. So you can use any kind you want. You just need to do a little looking into it if you desire to use something other than wheat. Now, what I do also is I make my starter out of wheat. So I always feed my starter wheat flour. But say I want to make a bread and I want to throw in some rye flour and some spelt and some of those ancient grains like that, or I've baked with einkorn before. I just don't put that in my starter. But when I get my recipe going, because every time I'm ready to bake, I'm going to half this starter and I'm going to put some in a bowl that I'm going to feed and bake with. And then this is going to stay in this jar. I'm going to feed it for later. I just never put those other flours in this jar, but I do bake with them in my recipe. That brings me to my next point. Some of you, I've seen some pictures on Instagram and Facebook and different places, are getting lots of bubbling action. That's so exciting, and that means you're ready to bake something or you're really close. Now, I told you, you need to get to the really bubbly stage. It needs to be doubling in size in the 12 hours between feedings. Someone posted a really cool comment. They said you can do a float test, which I'd never heard of. You can take a little bit and put it in water, and if it floats, it's ready. There's also what's called doming, where it kind of rises up in your jar. I really don't get too particular about it. If mine is really bubbly, frothy, and at least somewhat doubling, I go with it. But to bake something simple like sourdough pancakes, you don't have to be at its peak. So that's what I would start with, and that's what I'm going to show you how to make. It's nighttime. I'm actually in the kitchen cooking supper. I just throw this into my routine. It takes minutes. It's not something that I have to stand in here and make a job out of. I'm just already in here, so I throw this together, and then breakfast is planned. There's not much to it in the morning, but I'm going to take you along. So if you've got bubbles and you feel like your starter is strong enough to make something, it may not be ready to make bread. It's probably not. You can make this right now. So come along. One other thing before I put my questions away, I wanted to tell you. I was also asked about water. Water temperature, what kind of water to feed it. Does it have to be filtered water? It does not have to be, but chlorinated city water can damage any of your ferments. I don't think that it's impossible to use that, but just use the best water available to you. If tap water is what you got, use it. It's better than not doing it at all. So just get in there and get started is the main thing. Okay, let's make pancakes. Okay, so I am going to half my starter that's in my jar. I fed this 12 hours ago. So you just take out about what's half in your jar. Never use it all or you're done. You always leave half to feed and put aside for next time. Okay, so I've just got a little dab, I don't know, maybe half a cup in this bowl, maybe not that much. It really is not a huge deal how much you have in there. You just need some. Now, I want to wind up, this is important. Someone else asked me how to take that starter and sub it in recipes, even sourdough recipes. It is not hard. What you need to do is, my recipe in the morning needs 4 cups of batter. And I'm going to make a big bunch of pancakes and just put them in the fridge if we don't eat them. But Ben is actually on vacation and we're working on fencing. So when I'm in here cooking, I'm trying to make big batches so that we have stuff to eat. So I want to wind up with 4 cups in the morning of batter. So what I'm going to do, there is more technical ways to do this, but this is just how I cook. If it works, I keep going with it. When it messes up, I'll go back and research some more. But so far this has worked. If I want to wind up with 4 cups, I'm going to feed it 2 cups of flour, 2 cups of water, and that usually winds up pretty close. And in fact, pancake batter needs to be, it doesn't need to be real watery. So I'm probably going to go ahead and put about 2.5 cups of flour and 2 cups of water. You can just play with this part. None of this is rocket science. None of it is super technical. It's very forgiving. I'm going to leave this lid off because I need to feed my starter too. Another question I had, how do you maintain this thing, this starter? So every time you half it, you have to feed it again. So I just halved it, so I'm going to feed it the 3/8 cup flour. Okay. And 1/4 cup water. So I'm just going to stir this. I'll come back to this in a second. I'm just going to stir this up and set it aside. Now, once your starter is good and going, pretty thriving, you can just feed this once a day. You can forget the 12-hour thing. It'll be fine to just feed this in the morning or at night. At room temperature, leave your loose lid on it, set it aside. That's if you want it out all the time and you want to feed it every day. I would say do that if you plan to bake with it quite a bit. You'll have it out, you'll have it ready, warmed up, ready to go. If you're not planning to use this all the time, I stick mine in the fridge. So I've just fed it. It's got a good meal. It's ready to go. I'll stick it in the fridge until I'm ready to bake bread again, or I want to make sourdough pancakes again, or whatever. But you have to think a little bit ahead if you're going to keep it in the fridge. It's convenient because I don't have to worry with it every day. But if I wanted to mix up sourdough pancake batter at night for the next morning, I need to pull this out in the morning. Like this would have needed to come out in the morning and gotten a feeding, divided and fed, so that it can be warming back up and getting going again. Okay, so right now you probably want to keep yours on your counter, and then you'll just get used to it, knowing to think ahead and think, I need to pull that out and give that a feeding because I'm going to want to mix up some bread tonight. Okay, so back to the pancake batter. I put about 2.5 cups flour, and I'm going to put about 2 cups water. I'm just going to stir this up. And this, I'm just going to cover with the towel because I don't want bugs or something to get in it overnight. And I'm just going to leave this sitting here until in the morning. And then when I come in the morning, it should be bubbly and ready to go. So I just want, before I leave you, I want to be clear about something. I had a lot of questions about how am I going to know how much to use? How do I put that in my recipe? How do I know what to do from here once I get the starter going? You are going to take your starter and divide it, and it's going to be a little bitty amount. And then you're going to feed it depending on how much you want to wind up with. So you're going to be looking at your recipe, and if you want to wind up with 3 cups, do about 1.5 cups of flour and water. If you need something a little thicker for pancakes, go a little more than 1.5 cups on the flour and a little less on the water, or vice versa if you need it a little runnier. It's not hard. Don't overthink it. Just get in there and start cooking with it. It's really good. I think you'll like it. And I'm going to bring you back in the morning and show you how I'm going to make these pancakes. But I'm going to leave you. I'm going to show you this batter. You can see it's lumpy. That sourdough starter will do a good job of breaking down the flour. I didn't get mixed in super good. So that's all there is to it tonight. I'll see you in the morning. Okay guys, it's the next morning, and I'm going to bring you along and show you now how I'm going to take my sourdough starter that I fed last night and make pancakes. So this is what it looks like, what I fed last night. Hope you can see all those bubbles. It looks plenty bubbly and fed to be making pancakes. Now if I was making bread, I'd probably want a few more bubbles than that. I might give it some more time, but this is plenty good. The first thing I'm gonna do is I've got me another bowl here, and I'm gonna add a few ingredients to this. Now you can find any recipe that you like to make pancakes. This is just the one I've always used. You can find tons of sourdough recipes online, and some of you ask me would I be sharing all my recipes. Really, when I get ready to make something, I just find me a recipe. I have a few favorites that I might show in the future sometime. I haven't made in a while, but I've made English muffins a time or two. I've made You can make muffins, cakes, all kinds of stuff with sourdough. So I'll probably be showing some of that in the future. I don't know how soon, but just find you some recipes. I've put 2 recipes on here already for sourdough bread. That is my go-to. That's what I do sourdough for, is to make our bread. So those are already on here, and if you will go to those videos, I walk you through feeding your starter, getting the right amount of starter going that you're gonna need for the bread recipe. So if you've got the starter going and you get to the point that it's ready to make bread, those videos will take you and walk you through the whole process. So look those up. Okay, first thing I'm gonna put, you can put this, remember I doubled this recipe. This is a pretty good size recipe. I've got 4 cups of starter over here. So you'll want to half all this if there's just a couple of you, or maybe even 3 people. But I've got 2 teenagers and a husband and myself that we're working all day on a fence project. So I'm trying to make enough breakfast to keep them going. So anyway, you can put about half a cup of coconut oil, olive oil, ghee, something like that melted at this point. I'm using applesauce just because I'm trying to sneak in some healthy options wherever I can. And I am gonna be using oil in my skillet, so I'm just putting the applesauce in the actual recipe. I'm gonna put 2 eggs. I'm gonna put a splash of vanilla. Put any extract you want. You can put any spices you want. I'm not gonna spice these up just because my family prefers plain. I'm gonna put a couple tablespoons of sweetener of your choice, which I'm using maple syrup. I've done this before and used honey, just whatever you wanna use. But I'm gonna use maple syrup. And lastly, a teaspoon of salt. Okay? That's last in that bowl. Now, I'm just gonna take a whisk and I'm gonna whisk all this together because I've got those eggs in there. I need to get those whisked up pretty good. While that's going, I'm gonna go ahead and heat up my skillets. Now, you can cook these any way you want. You can cook them on a griddle, you can cook them in a pan, just individual pancakes. I'm gonna do this a little different for time's sake this morning. Do this if you want, don't if you don't want to. I'm gonna turn this on not even quite medium because I don't wanna burn these. And I've got 2 different skillets going so I can get all this done at one time. So mine goes up to like number 10 on my burners, and I'm probably turning it to about a 4, okay? So that just kind of lets you know what I'm doing there. Just gonna get those heating. And I'm also gonna put a splash of olive oil in these pans so they don't stick. Just however much you need for your pan not to stick is what you need to put at this point. Okay, so now I'm going to mix 2 teaspoons of baking soda and 2 tablespoons of water. So this is just a 1/4 of a cup, measuring cup. I just filled it up about halfway, and I'm just gonna get that mixed together. You don't wanna just sprinkle your baking soda over this batter. You'll never get it incorporated enough to get the rise you want. Okay, next step, I'm gonna take this egg mixture and I'm gonna pour it in here with the sourdough batter. And I'm gonna whisk that together gently. Now we don't wanna lose all the rise on our sourdough starter we had over here. And remember, mine is 4 cups if you're adjusting this recipe. The recipe I found is actually for 2 cups. And I've done that before and it's about enough for me and the kids when Ben's at work. But I'm the type I'd rather have leftovers than everybody not have enough to eat. Okay, now, last step. This is so simple. I'm just gonna pour this baking soda water mixture in here. I'm gonna add just a tad more water because it's not all coming out. Okay, and then at this point, you want to just gently incorporate this pretty quickly because you don't want to lose all your rise. Okay, so I've had my skillets heating. I'm just gonna make sure the oil goes to the outsides. These are pretty big skillets. Use whatever size you have. And I've read some people doing it this way and then taking the rest of the batter and putting on a griddle at the same time. So you get all your pancakes done at the same time. Okay, I'm about to dump it in these pans, but before I do that, I'm gonna turn on my oven to broil. To heat up. I am putting it in these skillets. I'm only gonna brown the bottom and get a few bubbles going like you do for normal pancakes when you're about ready to flip. And then I'm gonna pop it in the oven to brown the top for just a few minutes. And then this is gonna be done. So I'm gonna split this between my two skillets. Maybe do this an inch thick, I don't really know.
You have to try these, guys, they're amazing.
Thank you, Emily. So these are big skillets. I think these are 12-inch skillets. And you can see they're not, I mean, they're maybe, I said an inch. They're probably like half an inch thick. But, so I'm just gonna brown these for a minute. And then I'm gonna pop them in the oven to broil. And then they're done. Okay, you can see how much this is bubbling. That means it's starting to cook on the bottom. So I'm gonna give this just another minute and then I'm gonna pop it in to broil and I'll time it how long it takes to broil so you'll know. Okay, so I'm making the pancakes and Ben just comes in from feeding with an awesome discovery.
You will not believe the size of this egg. This thing is crazy.
Let's just go ahead and zoom in on it. You ready?
Okay.
Wow.
That thing, hold on, get up there. That thing.
And you've got chicken poop on my cabinet.
Oh my, but look at the size of that. Ain't it just so cute? You thought it was a large egg, didn't you?
Okay, this one has broiled. I've pulled it out. And I want to show you, I meant to say, don't have your pan up on the top shelf right next to the broiler. Have it down on about the second or third shelf down.
Okay, that didn't work.
It didn't dump out as beautifully as I thought it was gonna.
I'm sure nobody's used to things not going as planned. Did you not put enough Earl?
I thought I did.
That's not gonna be beautiful.
Nope. Try number 2.
Take 2.
Whoa!
Then it just slid out. I couldn't even get in position.
I'm sorry. When it went, it went. Okay, so there's one huge pancake.
Where was it stuck? Just right
there
there on the edge.
Okay, guys, so you can see sometimes things don't always go perfect, but that's okay. It's still gonna taste good, I hope. If you started your sourdough starter, get busy making something. I know you're gonna love it. I had another person ask me last night, can you use sprouted wheat berries? I think from my limited experience, you can use any of those. Your starter is just gonna be partial to whatever you start it with. So I would be consistent. Like I told you last night, do the experimenting after you half it and put it in your bowl and you're ready to make a recipe. But the starter over here, stay consistent with, there's ways to transition to a new flour, but if you know what you're gonna be using, just start with that. Another thing that I was asked, if you don't have bubbles after a few days, chunk it and start over, because this time of year I told you is not super warm to be capturing wild yeast. So don't just keep fooling with the starter that you're not having any luck with. All you've got in it is a tiny bit of flour and some water. Start over. And you may not be successful in your first attempt. I was, so I don't know at what point to tell you to chunk it, but a lot of things I've read say after a couple days, if you don't have any bubbles at all, start over. So I hope that helped you. I tried to cover all the questions and show you how to make something simple. Find you some more recipes and experiment. You can make crackers, chips, tortillas, crepes, all kinds of stuff with sourdough. So give it a try. Stay tuned because we got a lot of cool videos coming up. Thanks for watching. We appreciate y'all and God bless.
The battery's dying, now it's time to chow down. The maple syrup.
Just a little.
Who's gonna be the first one to taste test it?
All right, Lane, tell us your honest opinion. Look at the camera and tell us.
It's good because I'm hungry.
Because you're hungry, or it's good because it's good?
Both.
What about you, sister?
Good.
Just one thumb up? Oh, 2 thumbs.
I'm trying to do 4. No.